welcome to a third episode of the Main Card MMA podcast. I am your host, Joe Murata, and how are you guys doing? This is recorded July 21st, in the morning following the fights on ESPN last night, UFC on ESPN 4. And we're just going to do a quick recap, little podcast on the main card fights last night. Although I did watch all the prelims, but a lot of decisions, I'm not going to get into that too much, if at all. But yeah, so let's just give this a quick recap, and then about Wednesday or Tuesday night, we'll have episode 4 of the main card podcast up, and that will be breaking down the upcoming fight with Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar, doing our predictions. So let's just get into this podcast. First, let's start off with our predictions from last week. 5 out of 6 fights we actually got right in terms of predictions of just who's going to win. I'll just run down the results real quick of the card, and then we'll break down each fight individually. Andrei Arlovski defeats Ben Rothwell. Alexander Hernandez beats Trinaldo by decision. Arlovski was also by decision. Dan Hooker KOs Vic in the round 1. Greg Hardy TKOs Juan Adams round 1. Walt Harris KOs Olenek round 1. And Leon Edwards beats RDA by decision. And so we had Andrei Arlovski beating Rothwell by decision, so that is 100% correct. We had Hernandez beating Francisco Trinaldo by a knockout. Not the way he won, but he did get the finish. I had Dan Hooker beating James Vick with a decision. Dan Hooker actually wins still, but gets a KO. Had Greg Hardy with a win with a KO. That's correct. Walt Harris win with the KO. That's correct. And our one loss, or I guess incorrect prediction going into the main event, is Rafael dos Anjos. We had him submitting Leon Edwards, but that was clearly not the case, as Leon Edwards took control of that fight for just about the entire fight. Maybe the first round, a couple judges gave it to Rafael dos Anjos, but it could have went either way in rounds 2, 3, 4, 5. Leon Edwards definitely just showing he does belong as a top contender in welterweight, and he gets the decision win. So my main takeaway from just the whole fight card, even prelims, is it was pretty good. AT&T Center in San Antonio had a really good card, in my opinion. I think the first 8 or 9 fights of the whole card, including prelims and leading into the first 2 fights of the main card, all went to decision, and then it immediately flips with 3 straight first round knockouts and then a decision win in the main event. So definitely was kind of seemed like a long card with just all the decisions, all the 15-minute fights, but I kind of like that because it led its way into, as soon as one fight ends and it went to commercial, the next fight was beginning. And then with the 3 KOs in the first round, that's when you get that timing for TV, when now you have about 10 or 15 minutes before the next fight starts. So then they kind of just show the same promotional videos for upcoming stuff or the fight that's about to go down. And it's kind of repetitive. But, yeah, nonetheless, the card was very good, in my opinion. I was entertained. Me and my wife watched the entire thing from about halfway through the prelims on through the main event. And, yeah, so let's just get into each fight individually and just kind of touch on each one. And then maybe at the end we can do a quick preview of what we're going to be talking about next week. So yeah, so the first fight of the main card, Andrei Arlovski versus Ben Rothwell. And a couple things I took away from that fight was Arlovski looks really good, at least against Ben Rothwell. However, him and Ben Rothwell both gassed out so hard in the last 3 or 4 minutes of that third round. I almost thought for that last minute or two, Arlovski was actually about to get finished because he couldn't even hold up his hands at one point. But luckily for him, Rothwell seemed just as tired, so there was no problem there. Rothwell did lose, I think, every round by all three judges. Arlovski was showing, really good footwork. He seemed light on his feet. His boxing and his striking seemed better than it's been in the past. Rothwell, however, he just seemed so flat-footed. He didn't really put the pressure on Arlovski. He just kind of stood there in boxing distance and just kind of kept getting jabbed at. I think in the first round was it when his nose got busted, and it just, his whole nose and his eyes were swelling and bloody. It seemed like for the whole fight. But yeah, in the second round, Andrei Arlovski came out. And he just seemed like he was throwing a lot of spinning attacks, a lot of like spinning back elbows, fists, even kicks. So I kind of felt like he knew he had this fight won, so he seemed like he was just more free-flowing out there. Just great movement. But that third round, they both fatigued out. It seemed like a lot of clinching just up against the cage, catching their breath. But good win for Arlovski. Ben Rothwell, not quite sure what his plans are for his future, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does maybe decide to take a step away, or he could take another fight or two and then see how he does, rather, and see what his future for his career is. And then the second fight was Alexander Hernandez versus Francisco Trinaldo. Alexander Hernandez did win that fight also by decision. And with that fight, it seemed a bit weird because I thought that was going to be probably the sleeper as the best fight on the card, just based off of just what I've seen them in the past. And I thought that was definitely going to be a explosive fight with a finish for Hernandez. However, it just there seemed like there was a lot of just wasted movement. Hernandez, a counterpuncher, as is Trinaldo, and none of them really wanted to make that first move. A lot of feints, a lot of jumping in and out, but never actually throwing anything. I think in the actual fight, let me pull it up. I think, they both only had 25 significant strikes landed in the 15-minute fight. So, and there were 0 takedowns. So there wasn't a whole lot of actual true action. It just looked good on TV because there was a lot of moving in and out, but not a whole lot of punches being landed. Hernandez was definitely being explosive from the outside and kind of, breaking his way in. And he would throw something, but nothing would really connect. And it seemed like Trinaldo was just standing in the center of the octagon, kind of walking Hernandez down to the back of the cage. But he also didn't really throw anything. Hernandez wins the decision. I kind of thought Trinaldo was going to get the decision, but he was in San Antonio. The whole arena was just going nuts for Hernandez. It was almost like they were at a Spurs game, cheering on him so hard. And so he got the decisions. Not that big of a deal to me that he got it when I thought he didn't, because, that's just how it is sometimes. But yeah, I kind of think that might have been maybe the least entertaining fight on the whole main card. And I had high expectations for that fight going in. But, Hernandez wins, and he's going to try to move his way up the lightweight division. It just, it's amazing when you see Hernandez and you think, he's cutting down to 155. But I guess at 170, he might be undersized. I think he's only 5'8" or 5'9". So that fight, like I said, not a whole lot of action there. It was just kind of a staring match, to say the least. And then the fight after that is when it starts picking up, because prior to this fight with Dan Hooker and James Vick, we had all those decision wins. And in this fight with Dan Hooker and James Vick, Dan Hooker gets the KO in round 1, 2 minutes and 33 seconds into it. And really not a whole lot to say about this fight because, it ended in 2 minutes with a Dan Hooker left hook. I think actually James Vick was going in for a hook punch when they were kind of in that exchange, and Dan Hooker got him first with that left and just put it right on the button and knocked him out cold. I think he was followed up with a couple hammer fists, but he was already out. But Dan Hooker looked really good. Didn't know he had that type of power to get James Vick, and I thought that was going to be a decision, but he nonetheless, he shows what kind of power he's packing, especially in that left. And Hooker looks good off of his bounce back loss against Edson Barboza, and now James Vick, following that Paul Felder loss, gets KO'd in the first round. So that's pretty rough for James Vick. It'd be interesting to see where Hooker goes from here. I think James Vick was ranked like 15 or something, and Dan Hooker was unranked, so you can expect that to swap. Maybe Dan Hooker could be ranked 14 or 15 or something, and Vick's probably out of the top 15 in the lightweight division. Following that fight was the Greg Hardy versus Juan Adams fight, and I was kind of intrigued with this fight because I haven't really seen Juan Adams before. I may have saw him once because he seemed familiar, but I couldn't remember his fight. And then obviously, you want to pay attention to Greg Hardy because it's like a freak show. You want to watch this guy with a troubled past in the NFL and personal legal issues make his way into the UFC so late in his athletic career, and see how he does. And he does get the first round finish, TKO, 45 seconds into round one. Not a whole lot to take away from this fight as well. I think Juan Adams, in the videos prior to the fight, it was just showing how much Juan Adams just despises Greg Hardy. And maybe he just got a bit ambitious because I think right off the beginning of the fight, I think Greg Hardy clipped him before Juan Adams went for that takedown. Because Juan Adams was able to get him to the ground, but in the process of taking Greg Hardy down, Greg Hardy kind of ended up landing on top of him and almost like sitting on his shoulders or his head, like sitting on his upper body with Juan Adams on his stomach. And then Greg Hardy just started throwing hammer fists to the side and the back of the head from above. And he might have thrown 12, 13, 14 punches. And Juan Adams was definitely not out, but he wasn't doing anything to defend himself. And I think that was partially because Greg Hardy was sitting on him. And the ref had to stop it, which, if you're not making any effort to defend yourself and you're just getting punched in the head over and over and over again, the ref's going to stop that 10 out of 10 times. But Greg Hardy, another KO win for him. And I think he's 5-1 in the professional career, 2-1 inside the UFC now. And his one loss was in a fight where I thought he was winning, but he did get DQ'd for that terrible knee. There's no excuse for that. And so the hype train for Greg Hardy just keeps trotting along. I'd like to see him step up and fight some better competition. Maybe some fighters that were, maybe even someone like Ben Rothwell, if Ben Rothwell's looking to still fight again. Because he's unranked. Greg Hardy, maybe he's not ready for a top 15 guy, but maybe instead of fighting all these guys with 4 or 5 fights as well, see how he does against, an experienced fighter past his prime, like Ben Rothwell, and see if he can even get past that hurdle before he starts fighting some tougher opponents. The co-main event following that fight was the Aleksei Oleinik versus Walt Harris, and man, that was exciting just to see another quick KO. It's almost like a little Jorge Masvidal situation with a knee very quick into the fight. Walt Harris gets the KO in round 1, 12 seconds into it. And, Walt Harris just came out aggressive. Oleinik with this, he has this weird stance where it's like his head's kind of ducked down with his hands up. And Walt Harris, I guess, saw that immediately and gave him a jump flying knee. And it looks like it connected underneath Aleskei's right arm, his rib cage, and maybe his part of his shoulder. His knee hit. But I mean, definitely looked like it hurt. But it kind of like whipped Oleksiy Oleinik's head with all that impact from that knee, and kind of left his chin exposed. And Walt Harris just finished him with just one shot with his left. I think he hit him with the overhand left, and just KO'd him 12 seconds into the fight. I think I even said, too, in last podcast that the way Oleinik was getting kneed by Alistair Overeem, that maybe Walt Harris might try to throw something himself with those knees, use Overeem's plan against him. And he even said that he knew Oleinik, wants to get you to the ground, so he was already kind of changed levels and just set himself up for a knee right up the middle. Oh, but Walt Harris looks really good. He was actually the betting favorite, even being ranked 4 or 5 lower than Oleinik. And Walt Harris, if we pull up the heavyweight division and see, who could be a fight for him to make. Let me get this up. Yeah, so Walt Harris just fought, and he was ranked 14, and he beat number 9 Oleinik. So, I mean, if he goes up to 9 himself, I mean, maybe a fight with Alistair Overeem. Cain Velasquez is ranked 8, but I don't think he's fighting anytime soon. I haven't heard anything about him ever since that knee injury with Francis. But maybe that, or Derek Lewis ranked at 5. Curtis Blades is there. So, Walt Harris, I mean, there's some good fights there for Walt Harris, and I mean, he's got some real power, and, people definitely have to respect it. But just about everyone in the heavyweight division does have real power. So yeah, so that was an impressive win for Walt Harris. And then our main event with RDA versus Leon Edwards. Let's get into that. And we kind of already briefly touched on it in the intro about the fight, that I thought Rafael dos Anjos was going to submit him, just like how he did with Kevin Lee. I thought Kevin Lee was a better fighter than Leon Edwards going into this fight, and so I thought he'd be able to handle him, but clearly not. Leon Edwards, his striking and his just composure was so impressive. I mean, he was keeping RDA away at all times with his jabs. He even got the first takedown of the fight in round 1 and just kind of held top position for a while. RDA seemed like he had a good plan in the first round. First couple rounds was attacking that leg, but he kind of got away from it. He did get a cut over his right eye. I think it was in round 2 with a nasty elbow by Leon Edwards. And that seemed like, from that point on, it just seemed like RDA just wasn't fully there. I don't know if he just had his vision impaired by the blood going in his eyes, or maybe just the fact that he knew he had this giant gash above his eye. But Leon Edwards was just, he just seemed like he just controlled the whole pace of the fight. He didn't seem fatigued at all. He didn't seem panicked. He just had like a calm face in there, and I was pretty damn impressed with the way he fought. I definitely didn't see that coming, but you got to give him the props. He came over here, down here to Texas, and he beat RDA pretty handedly. And after the fight, he did call out Leon Edwards. Did call out Jorge Masvidal, and he said he would like to fight him. But Masvidal has, since I saw last night before I went to bed, replied saying that he's not going to be taking that fight. That Masvidal was promised a title shot after the Askren win, and he definitely plans to follow up on that, but I'm not sure if he's actually, I don't know if that's just something he was told by someone. I mean, he is ranked 3, but, I mean, Colby Covington's going to be fighting Robbie Lawler, and Colby is ranked 2, so you'd think, I guess one of the two would get the title shot next. I don't think Tyron Woodley at 1 would get the title shot when Kamaru was healthy, just based off of how badly Woodley was handled by Kamaru in that championship fight. And I kind of do think Dana White in the UFC has a thing against Tyron Woodley. But that's a whole nother thing. Maybe we could bring that up in a different podcast about a little conspiracy theory about the UFC's opinion on Tyron Woodley. But even if he doesn't get Jorge Masvidal or Kamaru Usman, Edwards, because he did also mention Usman, because clearly he has a title, and that was his last loss 8 fights ago. He'd definitely be moving up in the rankings. I mean, he could see himself. He might even take Rafael's spot from 12 to 4, but probably not. He'd probably find his way in the 5 or 6. And, you got fights like Anthony Pettis, Darren Till, Wonderboy Thompson. I guess even maybe a Tyron Woodley if he decides to fight again. But yeah, it was a pretty good card on the UFC. And I just wanted to bring it to you guys on this podcast and just recap what we just all witnessed on ESPN. I was pretty excited to record this one just because I had a lot of fun watching these fights. And just wanted to break it down with you guys for anyone that's listening. So let's just recap everything in terms of this podcast. Is our episodes that comes out on the weekends, probably Sunday, is going to be recaps of our fights that we all watch on Saturday, and our Wednesday podcast will be predictions of the upcoming fight that weekend, and also just any midweek news, any rumors spreading around the UFC. But yeah, so that's what you guys can look forward to with this show. This is episode 3 of the main card. And episode 4 should be up Wednesday. So just keep an eye out on that. And I just want to say thank you guys for listening. And I'll see you on Wednesday.